Hi there, it's Marla at Narrate. In this week's message, we had the opportunity to watch Adam interview his friend and mentor, Vern Streeter. Vern is the pastor at Harvest Church in Billings and was instrumental in helping Narrate get started in Helena. Enjoy the message as we learn some wisdom that Vern has gained from his experiences of working in a church environment.
So thank you for doing this.
You're welcome.
You're referenced a lot at Narrate, and if it wasn't for your day job, I'd ask you to come speak every other week.
Thanks.
So bearing that in mind, there's some isms, as Kate would call them, that we use a lot that don't come from me, they came from you. And so, I don't know, I kind of feel like it's one of those when you get to introduce two really good friends to one another.
Yeah, oh, that's cool.
So what I want to do is accomplish introducing you, though you've been there before, to Narrate by going, here's Vern, here's this person who's had an incredible impact on me personally and this church called Narrate in Helena.
Yep.
By just talking through, where did this come from?
Yeah, cool. My privilege. Proud of you guys. Narrate Church. Talk about you all the time. So it's good to be with you.
People will often ask me, in fact, I was asked that on the drive here today, do you get criticized for that? And cynically I go, well, not to my face. But I do remember you were very intentional with me and the staff here to process how do we handle criticism and when do we handle it. And so I think really what I'd love for you to speak to is how do you handle criticism and how do you decide which criticism to address?
Yeah. So, like this one. Vern is a joke, all caps and an exclamation point. Pray for Vern to become real, quote unquote, real.
Wow.
Yeah, so.
And he put his name on there.
And he put his name on it, which is why I addressed it with him. If he wouldn't, it would have gone in the trash because it says, in the interest of integrity, please include your name. We're just holding people accountable to that.
Wow.
So I've been working on this. It's actually part of my stretch goals for this year is to handle criticism better because I still don't handle it very well. Huh. And I get hurt too easily. So the way I handled this one was I just called the guy and was like, what's going on? What'd you mean? And he ripped me hard and really came after our church based on a bunch of assumptions he was making about us. And so I kept asking him, like, so where'd you learn that? And he'd pause because he just thought about it. And in that thinking, that vacuum, here comes bad stuff, right?
Sure.
All that to go, the way I handled that one was have a conversation with the guy, hang up, pray for him, because I felt like that's a pretty wounded guy. There's anger in him. And
So how do you decide who you respond to and who you just throw the card in the garbage?
Most of the cards go in the garbage. I don't see cards that don't have names on them. They just end up in the garbage or frontline. Somebody throws it away. If I feel like they have a legitimate concern, I'm going to talk to them. One of my mentors, Tom Cousins, would always say to me, Vern, consider the source, consider the source, consider the source. He just hammered that into me.
Huh.
So if I got criticism from you, I'm listening. I'm very interested in that. If I get criticism from somebody who's a hostile atheist and hates my church, that's a different thing. Sure. Yeah, I'm going to consider where they're coming from. Doesn't mean I'll even ignore that person because I might really enjoy that conversation. But how I feel about it lots of times depends on the source.
Which is related to, I have these awesome memories of sitting in management team or staff meetings and somebody would say something like, everybody thinks that's a terrible idea. So we talk a little bit about this, but this idea of this is probably more of a staff thing for us, of not generalizing or overgeneralizing. Where did that come from for you, and why is that a value?
Yeah, it's interesting because it's there, and it's there all the time for me still. And
the sensitivity to that?
This sensitivity to it, and I do not like that overgeneralization. And so I'll even go this far with people when they go, someone just told me, I'll stop them. I'll go, who? Well, now Christians automatically think if I tell you that person's name, it's gossip. Not necessarily. That might be really important information, and the source of that information is really important. So it doesn't have a lot of credibility for me if it's somebody, but when there's a name attached to it, now it's got at least some measure of credibility. Same thing with this idea of, lots of churches.
Yeah, I already did it today.
And I'm like, okay, tell me about your research. What? Well, you said lots of churches. Like, how many have you been to in the last year? Well, like 2, nobody's doing any research.
Sure.
Lots of churches just means that church and really maybe my church. So I just want to hold people accountable to, does this have substance? Because we can hide under lots of and everybody. Well, if that's true, your point actually has a lot of merit. I just don't think it's true. So back it up, and then we'll wade into the content.
Yeah, I have these very distinct memories, and so the principle stands. I mean, we do it a lot. Like I said, probably more staff, but just this fear of asserting yourself in some regard and having your own opinions.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm not going to attach myself to this opinion because I don't want to be criticized for it. So I'm just going to pin it on lots of and everybody. It's kind of wussy. I don't like it.
Okay, UBU. I had the opportunity to do youth ministry under you for almost 10 years. And yet, from a Myers-Briggs or StrengthsFinder standpoint, we're very different people. And yet somehow you made room for that. So where did the UBU come from, and what does that mean for you?
One of the times I remember me at least hinting around it with you, or maybe saying it directly, was you had talked about being at Faith Chapel and watching Stan Simmons teach. And you mentioned that you recall him at one point moving to the left side of his pulpit, and then in another point, kind of a different type of point, he moved to the right side of his pulpit. And you were putting all that together going, that was intentional on his part, because he was matching his body language with his content. And I was like, I don't think so, Adam. He's just being him. He moved left, he moved right. He's got 4 services. I bet it doesn't look the same the next one, you know? And that made me think about Steve Strutz's experience with Chuck Swindoll, one of the great orators of the last 100 years, who at a preaching conference before the break at lunch says to the guys, okay, come back because I'm going to tell you the single most important thing about preaching after lunch. That's a great way to leave a bunch of hungry preachers hanging, you know. And Steve's so funny when he talks about it because he's like, Vern, I got my legal pad and I went to a blank page and I'm so ready. I mean, it's Chuck Swindoll. And Chuck goes, okay, here's the secret. Be yourself. Which Steve, as he talks about, is funny because it's like, it was a letdown for everybody.
Right.
Because it's so simple and so difficult, right?
Well, but it makes that point, and I think, so people who only know Narrate, they assume that Mother Church Harvest is just a bigger version of Narrate. And same with Grandma Faith E and, other parent Journey. So part of what I've had to reconcile since being in Helena is I've only experienced 2 churches, Harvest and Faith Chapel. And so I'm one of these, I've gotten better at saying to people, like, you need to understand, I don't have any church baggage. Like, I've had 2 experiences and they were both very positive. So I've never been shamed with the gospel. I've never been beat up in the name of God. Like, none of that's ever happened. But upon reflection, part of what I marvel at is you're a person of very strong conviction. Like, you hold your theological beliefs graciously, but with a fair amount of intellectual strength. And yet there's incredible diversity among our churches. I guess somehow in my head that must be tied into the UBU. So how does all that honor God, I guess?
There's been a few people in my life that liked me for me. That's real formative for me. And I'm talking like junior high. Like, I'm a little junior high hellion, and there's this guy named Steve who was a volunteer in the youth group. I knew intuitively that guy liked me for me. And I didn't need to be anything for him. And matter of fact, a lot of people didn't like me. That guy did like me. It felt so good to be liked just for who I am. I just kind of embrace that or absorb that, and I want others to feel that same kind of thing, because that feels really good. So you get to be you. Moses got to be Moses. Isaiah got to be Isaiah. Simon, Peter, and Paul, different cats, both honored by Christ. So I think a good portion of it comes back to, I know what it feels like for someone to let me just be me. I grew up in a family of scientists. Dad's a meteorologist and a geologist. Mom's a biologist and taught at Stanford. Sister's a pharmacist. Brother's an engineer. And then there's me. And so they didn't understand me. I was the odd guy out in my household. And so when people liked me for just the kind of kooky word guy I am, not a numbers science guy. It felt really good. So I want other people to get that too. I also think I honor that we're created in the image of God with our own uniqueness. And God does that intentionally and purposefully and wants the beauty of personalities to be on display. So we shouldn't carbon copy all that. You get to be you.
We certainly do that very well, because the further I get away from starting in Helen, I realize how much license you gave us, how much resource you gave us, and how little control and strings attached came with that.
But I'm glad to hear you say that. And we talk about our churches being different, and then there's our staffs, right? Like, so my staff is so cool. We just hired a senior pastor at church. He's coming on our staff from Wabash, Indiana, a friend's church. Wow. Just picked up a Southern Baptist from Texas who's going to be our youth pastor. This collection of Jesus-loving, God-fearing guys who have ministry as the focus, not their sort of tribe or whatever. Those guys I want to hang with. So that diversity is beautiful. So now we're kicking back as friends or in an intense conversation around something theological or just how to do church. All of a sudden we got this perspective in the room that's so healthy.
Yeah,
yep.
Wow. One of the things you used to always say, and then I think you stopped saying, was over-communicate, over-communicate, over-communicate. Lack of communication is the devil's playground.
Yeah. I've backed off of it a little bit, and here's where I screwed up. I think lack of communication is the devil's playground. So I think where there is a vacuum, it often fills with bad things.
So if people don't have information, they come up with, which is similar to what you were saying with that criticism earlier.
Exactly.
Okay.
That guy did not have information, and he thought of it up on his own without coming to me and asking. Here's where my screw-up happens, is that I think of the church as a family.
Okay.
Theologically, we know it's a family, biblically. But a family of 5 and a family of 2,000 is a different deal. And so where I over-communicated was with the broader family of Harvest Church. And there would be times where I'd give too much information. I'm a pretty direct, honest guy, and so it doesn't bother me to give lots of information. I like information. I think people would too. But I've made mistakes of giving too much information to too many people. I could have given the right amount of information to that big group of people and filled the vacuum with just enough. Or I could get a smaller group of people and give a lot of information because they actually really need to know it. And I think that's where that church discipline thing, actually, that's the dynamic there that you got to work on. Is who really needs to know this stuff. So I still think the lack of communication is the devil's playground, but now it's appropriate communication. I'm wiser about that now.
And that's all related to this idea of excellence, which I know that guys like you and I are getting criticized for being misunderstood in all those ways.
Yeah.
The story I remember of you, is that you were at some kind of a gathering, and the person running the microfiche on the overhead projector had the words crooked, and you like teared up when you were telling this story to the staff of like, that thing should not be crooked.
Yeah. One of the ways we said this statement was, God is perfect, so we pursue excellence together. And I think that's really important, because you're not going to succeed in accusing me of being a perfectionist, and you're not going to succeed in accusing me of demanding perfection. And the way that you can't is because of that delineation there. God is perfect. We can't do that. So we pursue excellence. All right, so we're going to strive. Not even towards perfection, but for excellence. Some great lines in there, and that's fine, but you get the point.
So when you say you're not going to accuse you of being a perfectionist, you're not trying to be perfect. You're trying to be excellent.
Exactly. Yeah. And one of the reasons I'm not trying to be perfect is because biblically, theologically, God told me to stop trying to be. So there's where grace comes in. So yeah, we're going to give grace. Yay, we now have grace. We should pursue excellence. So it all makes sense to me. So that deal there was I was actually running the overhead projector. It was early 90s. I'm running the overhead projector in church. And, when I put it up there, it starts to look crooked. And I just make sure it's nice and straight. And I look at it there, and I look at it there, and I make sure it's good and straight. And a fellow staffer, pastor, kind of mocked me for that, called me obsessive compulsive. And I was just so hurt by that. Well, no, there's a criticism. This is one of my hang-ups that I'm working on. But I was just so hurt that, wait a minute. Okay, this is a worship environment, and I actually think it's a little distracting and even a little disrespectful to have that thing crooked up there. Let's put it straight. These are sacred lyrics that people are entering into the throne room of God using those lyrics. It seems like they should be straight. Now, that extends to the rest of the worship environment. How does it sound? What are your sight lines like? Where are your speakers located? Is the lighting any good? What kind of chairs are people sitting in? You know, we should be pursuing excellence in all those areas, especially because it's God. Now, all we got to do is go, well, let's take a look at that tabernacle. I mean, God was very particular and highly excellent when he designed that thing and was quite demanding on how that thing was supposed to be put up, taken down, put up again. So the biblical weight is on our side of we should do it excellently. This guy that was just ripping me today would talked about it's just such a big production. And so I just pushed him, he's talking about our weekend. I just pushed him on how do you interpret what we're trying to do there? Well, you're trying to keep people's attention. I'm like, no, we're not. You're not? Nope. And so I just talked to him about what we're actually trying to accomplish when we're using resources to give people quality worship experiences and that it doesn't suck. And he was like, he actually wanted me to go preach in a barn without a sound system. He was really talking like, if it was real, you'd just do that. Except that it contradicts the teaching of the Old Testament and the New Testament. So
let's talk about the importance of fun, because that goes with excellence. Because like that's almost dichotomous. Like, what's the value of fun in the context of Scripture and the character of God?
Yep. I always appeal to Christ offering us the abundant life in John 10 when we talk about fun. Came that you might have life and life at its best. Anybody who's going to talk about a good day, life at its best, there would have been some fun included in that. I just don't think that fun wasn't included in that. I understand that the word fun isn't used in John 10, but the word abundant life is. And so when we talk about what's abundant or fullness of life, it's going to include some satisfaction and some fun. The Hebrew calendar was organized around fun, those feasts. There were serious moments in the feasts, you know, but gosh, those were fun. Camping trip with your family, the Feast of Booths, you know, or hey, we're all going to Jerusalem, and it's going to be great food and great wine, and great friends and our family, and all the family's together again. All that stuff was fun. So God authored fun when he put feasts together and demanded that his people did them. Additionally, there's been a sense in Christendom that church is somber, boring, as it were, and I just don't think God's boring. So we should do
That's a really good
we should do things that reflect that. Like, God's not boring, but church is going to be. What?
Sure.
There was a guy that told me that he was talking to this lady who was, she was actually kind of criticizing our church because of some stuff we do is fun. She goes, if Jesus sacrificed his whole life for us, certainly we can sacrifice 1 hour a week to worship him. I'm like, what? That's why we're doing church the way we're doing it. This isn't sacrifice. Sacrifice is what's happening when you're getting beheaded for being a Christian. Coming to church, oh, that's worship. And there was nothing, when David described worship in the Psalms, about sacrifice that he was complaining about. He was so glad to be in the house of God. Better is one day in your course than 1,000 elsewhere. So with our fun, I am trying to help sort of reinvent people's perception of what church is. Gosh, it's our fourth core value. Fun required. It's one of our core values. So people know right away when they come to our church, or at least what they look in under the hood,
right,
as we talk about our core values. We're going to do some stuff that's
such
really
a weird thing to attack. I mean,
I know. Fun does not mean we're going to be irreverent.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we're going to be disrespectful to God. Doesn't mean we're not going to get really serious. And it doesn't mean that I'm not going to call sin sin. All that's still there. I just think I got more credibility because we're not taking ourselves too seriously.
Making Jesus available as possible to as many people as possible.
Yeah. I think there's so many different ways to show the lifestyle, the ethic, the care, the love of Christ in people's lives. So let's leave no stone unturned. How many different ways could we find to show people God's love? Living life as though Jesus is living through you. So when you walk into a boardroom, Jesus walks in. It's going to be a better board meeting. Right? You walk into a task force meeting, it's going to be a better task force meeting because Jesus just walked in. You go talk over the fence to your neighbor. If he has a conversation with Jesus, that's a good conversation. So in all of those venues, we're bringing Christ into that. So we're making him as available as possible. It includes doing things that might serve the community in a way that is surprising. Because we want people to go, what's the deal there? Then as many people as possible. That's just, for me, it's just so blatantly biblical. If Jesus died for the whole world, John 3:16 is real, then we would want to reach as many people as we can because he died for everybody. So let's take the availability of Christ and put that in front of that person. Then they get to deal with that because Jesus is the one that's doing the saving work. We're just going to put him in front of everybody. And then they can do with what they decide to do.
Are you still using that phrase that we want to exist in such a way that should we cease to exist, the most ardent critic of Christianity will be
Yes,
bummed?
regularly.
Where did that come from?
Yeah. So I'm 7 years into my 10-year run at Faithy, and they come to me and say, "Well, you think about planting a church in the Heights?" So that begins this process of me working on this. It took 3 years. And in the midst of that, I was doing research on starting new churches, planting churches. And the research was not encouraging. And because, planned urban developments or neighborhoods were writing into their deed restrictions or their covenants, whatever, laws that say no churches. Okay? So we're not going to allow a church into this part of the city or this community, or a guy that's going to develop a neighborhood, he'd put in deed restrictions.
Not going to sell any land to a church.
Exactly. Not going to sell land to the church. That's not the best thing to read in the world when you're thinking about, should I plant a church, right? So what happened, though, is this real definitive moment with God. It wasn't audible, but God and I had a moment, and it took a little while, and I'll just take you through it. What he caused me to do is go, just think about that for a second, Vern, because your temptation is to be offended by that. What? I can't believe you don't want a church. He's like, don't do it. Everybody else is offended. Don't do it. I just spoke in a generalization. Don't be offended. Just think about this for a second. Why wouldn't they want a church? Well, I guess because it doesn't matter. Yep, that's about relevance. Because somebody's making a decision, right? It's not some ethereal idea out there. It's someone making a decision. We don't want a church here. Why? Because it doesn't matter to my life. Restaurant, want food and I need it fast. Gas station, I can't drive too far to gas station, I need gas. Laundromat, need my clothes cleaned. Church, what goes that do? So the Lord's going, just don't stay there, man, go deeper. So he takes me down another level. Okay, wait a minute. Church is irrelevant, but the church, what's the message of the church? Well, it's the gospel. It's eternal life. It's the highest quality of life now and a life that happens to last forever. What's more relevant than that? Nothing. Right. Take it down another layer. Oh, no. By this time, he's got his boot on my neck. I'm like, oh, no. That's our fault. Because wait a minute. If Jesus trusted the church with the gospel, and that guy goes, I don't need the church, but I need a restaurant, that's not his fault. It isn't some conspiracy of, separation of church and state people. It ain't any of that. It's church folk. This is our fault. We took something that is the most relevant thing in the world and somehow made it irrelevant to people's lives so that they don't want the church in their neighborhood anymore. Oh, that's us. Because the message hasn't changed for millennia. So what he was doing to me is going, if you're going to start a church, it better matter. Otherwise, don't waste your time. And don't waste my resources. Matter of fact, it better be so relevant and so tangible in people's lives that even the most ardent critic of Christianity would be bummed if we cease to exist. We want that hostile atheist to go, well, I never believed a darn thing those guys thought, but sure is too bad they closed their doors because they were good for the community. Because that's what Jesus is. He's good for a community. So, guys, we better be good for the community. And so that's our Genesis story, is we started serving neighborhoods before we held a service at Skyview. So that's our DNA, if you call it that, right? So now it's just part of our church, and that little phrase gets used a lot, and we use it as a kind of a measuring stick. Is it happening? We had a position open, and this guy was interviewing. So he came in from out of town, and he was staying at a hotel, and he comes to me. When he gets to this meeting with me, he's sitting right where you are, and he goes, Vern, I want to work here. I'm like, why? He goes, well, I've been in town for a few days. So I've been going to restaurants and at this hotel and stuff, and people talk to me, where are you from? And I tell them, and then they say, what are you doing in town? I'm interviewing for a job. And they say, where? And he goes, I say Harvest Church. And they go, oh, I love that church. And then he goes, you go to that church? And they go, nope, but I love that church. They do all kinds of good things for our community. Wow. He was just the messenger of affirmation that it's happening. It was really encouraging.
So one more. I think the last conversation we had in my office here, and I'm going to have to get into the context, but the context where there were some harder days for you. I'll never forget you saying, Adam, and you were teared up, vision is cheap. You don't even have to get out of bed to have vision. Don't ever forget that. Yeah. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, where that really became alive to me is standing outside the back door of the Bear's Tooth at Beartooth Mountain Christian Ranch, where we did Super Summer. And I was looking up at Whitetail Peak, that mountain that's right up the road there, and it's got that huge snowfield on it. And then before summer celebration, the sun's always kind of starting to set, so beautiful. And that mountain's so majestic. And I was looking at it going, I'm gonna get up on top of that mountain. And then I realized, that's so easy to say that right here. Just so easy to go, like, I'm gonna go get up on top of that mountain. And then I actually tried 4 times. I agree, like, I'm gonna do it. And
you've done mountaineering. Like, this isn't just you.
Yeah, no, I failed 3 times before I finally got on top of it. And God was, I think, using that to go, this vision thing is cheap. Just go, like, we're gonna go do that. Oh gosh, but now all of the energy and the effort to actually do it, and do it when you're not even at full strength, because of a variety of reasons that you're not at full strength, that's what's expensive. So the reason I get emotional about that is because I've got such hopes and dreams for the local church and for my particular local church, and I want it to be so awesome. I want it to be Acts 2, And you read Acts 2 and you're like, that! And then
Well,
our
it
church,
sounds a little exhausting.
yeah, then our churches don't do it. And it's like, how do we get there? And then to your point, the exhaustion part is I'm striving so hard here and I'm not able to fulfill the dream. And now, is it my dream? Is it God's dream? I don't know. That gets confusing. So vision's just cheap to say this is where we should go or what we should do or what we want it to be. To rally everybody around it and to actually pour the resources in is huge. So our church built a water park for the community called the Oasis. So we raised $4 million and built this thing. Made enemies, lost friends, brutal time, right? Some of that context. Like, I think I'm convinced that God wanted us to do this, but man, was it brutal. And one of the things that Derry said to me by way of critique is, well, Vern, you didn't respect the vision. God gave you the vision, you didn't respect it. And what he meant was, I'm just casting vision for it and let's do it. How come it's not done yet? When what we needed to do was put more intentional resources towards that effort, including the kind of person that we hired to run the foundation and the board that we put together and how we fund it. And the capital campaigns around it, and we didn't order our self around that vision. Or in Darius' words, we didn't respect the vision.
Wow.
Yep. So if you're going to put it out there, you got to be ready to back it up, man.
Thanks for your investment in us.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's really, really special, man.
Let's pray together. Lord, we just thank you so much for people like Vern, leaders that are listening to where you would lead next, that invest so much in their own community, but then also sow it forward. Thanks for the resource and leadership that have been sown into Narrate. Thanks for Adam's leadership, and we'll just pray over Harvest Church and just pray the blessings that they continue to spread your vision and back that up with action in Billings. Lord, just thanks for the way that we gather here and are refreshed and energized. But that you send us out into the Helena community, and we just pray that as we keep that vision of loving you and loving others in front of us, that we would be able to back that up by action and just really participate with what you have going on here in Helena and helping to tell your story and that become our story. And Lord, we love you, and we just pray these things in your name. Amen. If you would like to engage further with Narrate Church, you can find contact information online, www.narratechurch.org. We would love to hear from you.